I broke my neighbor's window and blamed it on my dog. I, 29F, live in a quiet suburban neighborhood, and I've always prided myself on being a good neighbor. My neighbors and I have established a community that's both friendly and supportive. We look out for each other, help with yard work, and even exchange baked goods during the holidays. However, everything changed about 2 weeks ago, and now I'm left grappling with guilt and anxiety. It was a Saturday morning, the kind of day that feels perfect for getting outside and tending to the yard. I woke up early, the sun shining bright and birds chirping, a classic suburban scene. I decided to mow my lawn, something I usually find quite therapeutic. As I pushed the mower back and forth, I felt a strange itch on my hand. I looked down and saw a huge spider, a monstrous, hairy creature that looked like it belonged in a horror movie rather than my peaceful yard. My heart raced, and my mind went blank. In my panic, I instinctively grabbed the nearest object, a rock that I had picked up a few days earlier while gardening. It was smooth and cold, and in my frenzied state, I hurled it away from me as if it could somehow save me from this eight-legged terror. The rock flew through the air in slow motion, and I knew in that moment that something bad was about to happen. It smashed through my neighbor's window with a loud crash that echoed through the neighborhood. The sound sent shockwaves of fear through me. I stood frozen for a moment, horrified by what I had done. My heart was racing, and I could feel a knot tightening in my stomach. This was not just any neighbor. It was Tom, the sweet older man who lived next door with his wife. They were the kind of neighbors you could count on for a cup of sugar or a chat over the fence. How could I face him after this? In a panic, I grabbed my dog, Max, who was blissfully unaware of the chaos I had just created. Max is a lovable golden retriever with a goofy personality. He has a way of making everyone smile, and I thought, I can use him to my advantage. So, with my heart pounding and my mind racing, I dashed over to Tom's house, my pulse pounding in my ears. When I arrived at Tom's front door, I took a deep breath and knocked, my hands shaking slightly. The door opened, and there was Tom, looking both surprised and concerned. "Hey there, everything okay?" he asked, glancing around as if he could sense something was off. I instantly put on a faux worried face, gesturing toward Max, who was wagging his tail innocently. "Oh, Tom, you won't believe what just happened." Max had a crazy episode while I was mowing the lawn. He got spooked by a squirrel and knocked a stone loose. "I'm so sorry about your window." My voice came out a little too high-pitched, and I could see a flicker of disbelief in Tom's eyes. To my surprise, Tom's expression softened. "Oh, it's all right. Max is just a big sweetheart, isn't he? I can't stay mad at that face," he chuckled, scratching Max behind the ears as my heart sank deeper into my stomach. I felt a rush of relief, but it was quickly followed by an overwhelming wave of guilt. Here I was, lying to a kind man who had always treated me with nothing but respect and friendliness. After the initial shock wore off, Tom invited me inside to discuss the window repair. As we sat at his kitchen table, he shared stories about his grandkids and their latest adventures. I couldn't help but feel a twinge of guilt every time he laughed or smiled. Here I was, enjoying his company while harboring a secret that could ruin everything. Tom reassured me that it was just a window and that he would get it fixed soon. He insisted that I shouldn't worry about it. Accidents happen, after all. I nodded along, trying to mask my discomfort, but the guilt weighed heavily on me. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was betraying his trust. The more we talked, the more I felt like a fraud. As I left Tom's house, I was filled with conflicting emotions. On one hand, I was relieved that he seemed to have forgiven me. But on the other hand, I was grappling with the guilt of lying. I love Max, and I never wanted him to be associated with something so negative. He's an innocent creature who just wanted to enjoy the sunshine and play fetch. How could I drag him into my mess? Over the next few days, I tried to put the incident behind me, but it haunted me. Every time I saw Tom outside, fixing his garden or chatting with the other neighbors, I felt the weight of my lie pressing down on me. I avoided looking in his direction, hoping he wouldn't bring up the broken window again. Each time I walked past his house, I imagined the shattered glass and the disappointment in his eyes if he ever found out the truth. I even found myself inventing excuses to avoid interactions with him. I'd pretend to be busy with yard work or walk Max in the opposite direction. But it wasn't just Tom I was avoiding. I was also avoiding my own conscience. I knew I had to come to terms with what I had done, but the thought of confessing made me feel nauseous. A week after the incident, Tom came over to my house with a plate of freshly baked cookies. He smiled and said, "I wanted to thank you for being such a great neighbor. It's nice to have someone like you around." The compliment felt like a dagger to my heart. How could I accept his kindness when I had wronged him so deeply? I thanked him, forcing a smile as I accepted the cookies. Inside, I was churning with guilt and regret. I wanted to confess, to tell him the truth about the spider and the rock, but fear held me back. What if he never forgave me? What if our friendship was ruined forever? As days turned into weeks, the guilt began to fester. I found myself overthinking every interaction with Tom. I started to notice little things, the way his laughter sounded, the warmth in his voice, the kindness in his actions. I realized that he was genuinely a good person, and I had taken advantage of his goodness for my own sake. It felt like betrayal, and I was the one who was suffering the most. I also began to notice that Max seemed to sense my turmoil. He would nuzzle against me when I was lost in thought, as if he could feel my guilt weighing me down. I loved that dog more than anything, and the thought of dragging him into my mess made me feel even worse. I wanted to protect him from my mistakes, but the burden of my lie was becoming too heavy to bear. After a particularly rough week of anxiety and sleepless nights, I finally made the decision to come clean. I couldn't live with the guilt anymore. I had to face Tom and tell him the truth, no matter how difficult it might be. I rehearsed my words in my mind, trying to figure out how to break the news without hurting him. The next day, I gathered all my courage and knocked on Tom's door. My heart raced as I waited for him to answer. When he opened the door, I was hit with a wave of guilt all over again. "Hey, Tom," I started, my voice shaky. "Can we talk for a minute?" He nodded, concern etched on his face. I stepped inside, my palms sweaty and my heart pounding. "I need to tell you something about the broken window." I took a deep breath, trying to steady my nerves. It wasn't Max. It was me. I panicked and threw a rock when I saw a spider on my hand. Tom's expression changed from concern to confusion, and I hurried to explain. "I'm so sorry for lying. I didn't want to get in trouble, and I thought it would be easier to blame Max. I feel terrible about it, and I understand if you're upset with me." For a moment, there was silence as Tom processed my confession. I braced myself for his reaction, fearing the worst. But then, to my surprise, he started to chuckle. "You had me worried there for a second," he said, shaking his head. "You know, I figured there had to be more to the story. Max wouldn't hurt a fly." Relief flooded through me, and I couldn't help but laugh nervously. "I can't believe you're not mad at me," I exclaimed. "Honestly, accidents happen, and I appreciate you coming clean," he replied, his eyes twinkling with understanding. "Just don't let it happen again, okay?" As we talked, I felt the weight of my guilt lifting. It was a strange feeling, almost like a burden had been removed from my shoulders. Tom and I ended up having a long conversation about everything: our lives, our families, and even our love for dogs. I learned so much about him that day, and it felt good to reconnect as neighbors. I also apologized to Max, who had been sitting quietly at my feet, completely oblivious to the drama. "I'm sorry I dragged you into this mess, buddy," I said, giving him a scratch behind the ears. He wagged his tail, looking up at me with those big, trusting eyes, and I couldn't help but feel grateful for his unwavering loyalty. From that day forward, I made a promise to myself to be more honest, not just with others, but with myself. I realized that it's okay to have moments of panic and fear, but it's how we handle those moments that truly matters. I learned that facing the truth can sometimes lead to unexpected connections and a deeper understanding of ourselves and those around us. In the weeks that followed, Tom and I grew closer as neighbors and friends. We started sharing more meals and even yard work. I felt a renewed sense of community and friendship that I hadn't fully appreciated before. It was a reminder that, while mistakes can happen, it's the connections we build and the honesty we share that truly matter. As for Max, he continued to bring joy into my life, reminding me of the simple pleasures of being present in the moment. Every time I mowed the lawn, I would chuckle at the memory of the spider and the rock. It became a funny story I could share with Tom and our other neighbors, transforming a moment of panic into a light-hearted tale about friendship and understanding. So, here I am, confessing my guilt to the universe. I broke my neighbor's window, and while I can't change the past, I can learn from it. It's a reminder that honesty, even when it's difficult, can lead to growth and deeper connections. I'm grateful for Tom's kindness and for the lesson I learned about facing my fears instead of running away from them. In the end, I learned that we're all just trying to navigate this crazy life, and sometimes we stumble along the way, but it's how we pick ourselves up, admit our mistakes, and reach out to those around us that truly defines our character. I hope that by sharing my story, I can encourage others to be honest with themselves and their loved ones, even in the face of fear. Because in the end, it's those honest moments that lead to genuine connections and a life filled with understanding and compassion.